I get a call and I look down. I was like, oh, it's one of Briggs' buddies. And my first thought is, he probably lost his phone and Briggs trying to get a hold of me. He had severe internal bleeding. His liver and kidneys were lacerated to the point where it had basically drained all the blood in him. He actually coded when we were in Moab. They couldn't get enough units of blood in him. He had lost basically everything. They gave him 10 units.
We were all super big into, dirt bikes and enduro cross, I guess we call it, and trail riding. Last year around April, we had gone to Moab and done this exact same trip. So we were all super excited to try and get back there and do it again. It seemed like months we were planning this trip, and the time finally came. We were all loaded up and headed up there, and I remember we were going down the road. I remember turning off the road, just following these trails, and we get out there. I'm third in line, so there's two guys just right in front of me. We head up this hillside, makes like a big U-turn and head up. 3/4 of the way up that hill is it's like a rock face, probably 3 feet tall. Nothing crazy, like stuff we ride on all the time. The front end came up. As soon as it did, I went to grab the clutch and the bike stalled. So I kind of just pushed off the bike and jumped backwards. Where this was going on, there's a nice big flat open area, and then it kind of slanted down, and I landed and I kind of slid a little bit, and I knew it was a cliff on the edge, so I started sliding, and I'm trying everything to hook the heels of my boots in the ground. I'm pushing down with my hands, and I start sliding. I'm slowing down, and I finally almost come to a complete stop, but the bike's behind me and it comes sliding and just pushes me, and I get closer to the edge, and I knew like there was no way I was stopping at this point. So like at the last second in my head, I was like, oh, I don't want to get banged up across the cliff going down, so I push off. The cliff was probably about 75 feet. Next thing I know, I'm waking up on the ground. I was shocked. I was like, no way I made it. It's like, that is crazy.
Brigham and Lauren Richardson, welcome to the Rollercoaster Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Excited to have you guys. So I have a good friend of mine that I was at lunch with about a year ago. I guess technically less than a year ago. This would have been October of last year. And he watches the podcast and knows some of the stories that we have on the podcast. And he said, hey, I've got a neighbor and a really close friend that was in an accident that was pretty tragic. And he didn't say anything. He pulled out his phone and he showed me this video, and it was you. And we're going to show that video. I'm not going to describe what happened in the video yet. I'm going to let you do that. But it's hard to watch. It's super hard to watch. I knew nothing about you. We didn't have a personal connection at all. And I just immediately felt kind of sick to my stomach, like watching that. And so I remember following up with this friend several times in the impending months. And I just said, how's he doing? Did he make it? Is he alive? And you were hanging on and hanging on and hanging on. And then eventually you started making progress. And about a month ago, we got to meet for the first time. And so, Brigham, I want you to just set the stage for this super tragic story by maybe describing, sort of the events leading up to October 25th of 2024.
Yeah. So, I had a group of friends. We were all super big into, dirt bikes and enduro cross, I guess we would call it, and trail riding. We'd ride here on average 2 or 3 times a week, just around Arizona. We'd done trips to Durango, American Fork. And last year around April, we had gone to Moab and done this exact same trip. We'd done Swing Arm City, Moab, and 5 Miles of Hell was, the big one. So we were all super excited to try and get back there and do it again. So we planned, seemed like months we were planning this trip. And the time finally came. We were all loaded up and headed up there, and the first place we stopped was Swing Arm City, and we rode there for a good part of a day. And while we were there was a pretty steep obstacle that we were all playing on, and we'd gone up it a couple times, and I decided to go back down it. And as soon as I dropped down, like, I went over the bars and the bike tumbled and banged it up pretty good. I was totally fine, but that was the end of my day for that day. And so headed into Moab, I'm scrolling Facebook Marketplace and finding all the parts that I needed to fix the bike for the next day because I didn't want to miss out on the other riding. Spent that evening putting the bike back together and hanging out. And the next morning we all woke up and headed out, stopped at the gas station, grabbed some snacks and drinks, got out there, and we rode around for a few hours. Nothing crazy. It was just a good time, exactly like we'd done before. And we probably rode for 4 hours, 5 hours, and headed back to the truck to get fuel and re-up on our water and snacks. And I had a GoPro in my helmet at the time, and I took it off, threw it in my bag because, nothing crazy had happened that day. It was, nothing impressive. So we were taking off on one more ride, and I remember we were going down the road. I remember turning off the road and just following these trails, and we get out there, and there's 9 of us in this group, and I'm third in line. So there's 2 guys just right in front of me, and we head up this hillside, and it kind of makes like a big U-turn and head up, and 3/4 of the way up that hill is like a rock face, probably 3 feet tall. Nothing crazy, like stuff we ride on all the time. And I don't know, just something a little different. I didn't hit it with enough speed, or didn't have enough, I wasn't quick enough to grab the clutch, but the front end came up, and as soon as it did, I went to grab the clutch and the bike stalled. And it's happened numerous times. So I kind of just push off the bike and jump backwards and land on my butt. And where this was going on, there's, a nice big flat open area, and then it kind of slanted down, and I landed, and I kind of slid a little bit, and I knew it was a cliff on the edge. So I started sliding, and I'm trying everything to, hook the heels of my boots in the ground. I'm pushing down with my hands, and I start sliding. I'm slowing down, and I finally almost come to a complete stop, but the bike's behind me, and it comes sliding and just pushes me. And I get closer to the edge, and I knew like there was no way I was stopping at this point. So like at the last second in my head, I was like, oh, I don't want to, get banged up across the cliff going down. So I push off, and I just remember falling, and there's a tree. And in my head, I was like, man, if I could just get over that tree, it'll break my fall. And there was nothing I could do. Kept going, and it seemed like forever. And I don't know, like if you've ever cliff jump into water, like you feel like you're going like this with your arms, try and stay level. And I felt like this is what I was doing. And next thing I know, I'm waking up on the ground, and I was just like stunned. I was shocked. I was like, no way I made it. It's like, that is crazy. The cliff was probably about 75 feet straight to the ground. And I remember the bike was on top of me, and one of my buddies who was across the way comes running over and gets the bike off of me. And
he was the one filming.
Yeah, he was the one that got the video. And I was in and out of consciousness pretty much the rest of the time. And there's just like tidbits that I remember. I remember he got over there, gets the bike off, and then I was unconscious again for I don't know how long. And then I remember waking up again, and all my friends are around me. And I can remember, cracking a couple jokes, trying to make it seem, like it wasn't that big of a deal. And then I was telling them, I was like, someone needs to call Lauren, like call my wife, call Lauren. They're like, oh, we'll call her. And then I don't remember anything for a while. And the next thing I remember is the paramedics are there, and I remember just begging them for morphine. I was, morphine, I need some morphine, like give me some morphine. And they were taking blood pressure, like getting all my vitals, and they couldn't get a reading on my blood pressure. So they wouldn't give me anything until they could. And it was a newer paramedic and like a more senior guy. And the newer paramedic was the one taking the blood pressure. And so the senior guy thought he was doing something wrong, and they just could not get a reading. And come to find out there was just so much internal bleeding from, the fall and the bike landing on top of me that there wasn't any blood to read. And I don't know how I got from there to the ambulance, but the absolute last thing I remember is laying in the ambulance. And I don't know if it was something someone said, or if there was I doubt the radio was on, but I just remember going, man, that's a good song. And then it was just lights out for a while.
So Lauren, I'm an avid motorcycle racer, used to ride dirt bikes, had enough injuries that I stopped riding dirt bikes as I got older. My wife has had some traumatic experiences around motorcycles. Her father was a motor officer and was in an accident. in the middle of the night and essentially was pronounced dead and ended up living. He was in a coma for several months, and I don't even know if I shared that with you, but so she hates these things with a passion, but it's one of my great loves, and I understand the risks that are associated with them. And, I think as I've gotten older and started a family, I'm just a little more careful with how I use these high-powered machines. When Brigham would go on these trips, I mean, did that cause any anxiety for you, or was it just another trip? Like you had no worries at all?
I'm a pretty anxious person by nature, and Brig would always tease me about it. Like anytime I'd hear a siren or anything, I'm just like on edge, or kids are doing something a little too crazy. But I'm just naturally, my mom's very much like that. She kind of passed that on to me. And so I knew he loved it so much. So I never made a big fuss about when he would go on these trips, because I knew he had a good time. He loved doing it. He was a good rider. He would ride all the time. And they had done this trip before. And so when, he'd leave on something like this, there'd always be that, like, something could happen. But it was one of those things where it's like, it's not going to happen to him. He's going to be fine. So yeah, there was always a little bit of anxiety, but, I never really expressed that to him. It was kind of just like, hey, you go have fun. Just make sure you're careful. Check in with me as much as you can. So yeah, I was, always a little nervous about it, but never, to the point where I'm like, you can't go. You don't get to go. That's way too scary, but always in the back of my mind for sure.
Yeah.
So
so who ended up calling you, and what do you remember about this phone call when you hear this news?
So I thankfully was in Utah at the time. I was visiting family when he said he was going to Moab. I was like, oh, I'll take the kids. We'll go visit my brother and my sister-in-law. They've got kids, and go see some of the fall weather and enjoy that for a bit. And we had been at a like amusement park type thing all day with the kids, and finally got back, and I was hanging out on the couch, and I get a call, and I look down. I was like, oh, it's one of Brig's buddies. And my first thought is, he probably lost his phone, and Brig's trying to get a hold of me. And then I was like, oh, or someone got in an accident. And I pick up the phone. I go, Jake. I go, who got hurt? I'm like, is Brigham okay? And he was kind of a little hesitant on the other line. He was like, hey, yeah, so Brig took kind of a nasty fall. Like, he might have broken his pelvis, and I think he broke his arm. And that's all I said. And I was like, well, is he okay? And he was like, well, they're gonna take him by the ambulance to the hospital here in Moab. And I was kind of still cracking jokes at this point. I was like, hey, we can't afford an ambulance. Why doesn't someone just drive him there? And he was kind of like, yeah, like you might want to come down here when you can. And I was like, oh, okay. And that was kind of the end of the call. And at this point, I'm like, broken pelvis. I'm like, that takes several weeks to heal, how are we going to get his stuff back? I'm sure his buddies don't mind driving his bike back. And my brain's just kind of going through all the possibilities of the information that I was given. And then he calls back, and he's kind of like, hey, so they're gonna take him to a hospital in Grand Junction. They're gonna helicopter him to Grand Junction. And I was like, okay, well, that's a little more serious. Brig's friend, for my sake, still wasn't kind of disclosing all the information about what had happened, but he's like, I think you're gonna wanna head down there. And I was like, all right. And I kind of told my sister-in-law, I was like, hey, Brig was in an accident. I don't really know his status right now. And she was kind of like, leave the kids. We've got 2 little kids. And she was like, just take my car and go. And like I said, luckily I was in Utah at the time, because it's about a 4-hour drive to Grand Junction from Utah, as opposed to the 9-hour drive or getting on a flight. So I was there relatively quickly, and his buddy kind of kept in contact and was like, hey, pick me up in Moab. I'll drive you the rest of the way. And I was like, it's only 4 hours. Like, I'm doing fine. I'm good on sleep. It wasn't too late. I got the call about 3:30 in the afternoon. And so I was like, really, I'll be fine. And he goes, no, pick me up. I'll take you to the hospital. And I was like, all right. So my mind's, running at this point, just kind of all the possibilities. And I'm kind of a little bit in shock. I don't know many of the details yet. And so when I'm kind of getting close to Moab, I stop and I pick him up and I go, okay, tell me what happened. Like, what's all the information? And he's like, you want to know? And I was like, yeah, I want to know. And he kind of tells me, he goes, well, we were riding and I was right behind Brig. And so I kind of watched it all, but he kind of just gave me the synopsis of what happened. He goes, he fell off the side of a cliff and fell about 70 feet. And I was like, okay. I was like, so it wasn't just a broken pelvis and a broken arm. He goes, yeah, he's not in great shape. And I was like, all right. And we had about 15 minutes left till we were going to get to the hospital in Grand Junction. And when we pulled up, at that point, all the entrances were closed. We had to kind of go through the emergency, and the security guards are like, oh, Richardson, he's up in room, yada, yada, yada. And so we're heading up to the ICU unit, and they had sent us to the wrong room. And I, kind of look in, and I was like, whoa. I was like, he's swollen? They shaved his face. Like, what's going on? And then a nurse comes around the corner, or I think we went to the nurse station. We were like, hey, is this Brigham Richardson? They go, oh, no, that's not him. And I was kind of like relieved because this guy did not look in great shape. It goes, no, he's a couple rooms down. So we go in to the room, and I was like, well, this guy doesn't look in great shape either, but I do know that's him, And the nurse was in there, and he was covered in this blanket. He was intubated, and I just go, is he okay? And he's like, we just wrapped up surgery. They had to cauterize. He had severe internal bleeding. His liver and kidneys were lacerated to the point where it had basically drained all the blood in him. And the doctors were able to get in there. They were able to cauterize everything, and he's stable right now. But that's right now. Like, we're not sure what the night's going to look like. And I was kind of just like, okay. And Brig's friend that had driven me there, that had kind of been withholding information just so that 4-hour drive wasn't, me spiraling the whole time. He kind of goes, Lauren, I didn't tell you everything. He goes, I went with Brig to the ER in Moab, and I was kind of sitting there, and they came out and they kept saying, he's not doing good. And I was like, okay, but he's like stable now. And he's like, yeah, but he actually coded when we were in Moab. They couldn't get enough units of blood in him. He had lost basically everything. They gave him 10 units, and I think your body holds 9, I think is the number. I might be wrong on that, but I was like, okay, so, and they got him in the helicopter, and they were able to get him here. And they were like, yeah, but they were telling me, they were worried about him making the flight over. They thought he would die on the way over. He's like, so I wanted to make sure I was here. I thought maybe I'd be taking you and they'd be telling you that he had passed. And so I was grateful that he kind of kept that information till the end. He wanted to make sure Brig was okay before he kind of just let me go in there and find out myself. But from there, I felt like there were a million doctors in there. It was quiet when we first got there. And then all of a sudden, when they found out, the spouse was here, they all start coming in. They were explaining the surgery that they had done, that it was successful. But again, they don't know if it's going to hold. It was, he had lost a lot of blood. He's not in great shape. These doctors kept pulling up his x-rays. And, I'm looking at, I don't know what I'm looking at. It looks like a bunch of specks on a screen. And they're like, this is not good. His sacrum's in like 9 or 10 pieces. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And they're like, well, if we can get in there and repair it, he might, lose, function of lower half. But it's pretty serious, and his pelvis is bookended, which means it splits like in the middle and opens up. And they're like, but we're getting some surgeons in here, and we're going to try to get it fixed up. And so that night they sent in this guy, and he put a rod through Briggs' knee and he was trying to kind of level out his pelvis. And it looked like a torture contraption. It was like this big metal rod, and at the end it had like 10 to 15, like it was 10 to 15 pounds, like these little weights at the end kind of pulling it. And he sat like that for quite a while. He ended up having that thing in his leg for a bit just to make sure his pelvis was normal. And but that was like the first. I was still kind of in shock, and Briggs' buddy stayed there with me that night. He stayed at a hotel across the street, and then he went back to Moab. And that next morning, I don't know if you want me to go into the rest until like Brig, gets up.
Yeah,
but
do you remember him waking up?
Yeah, the next morning was kind of when like reality hit, and I was like, I'm here alone. I don't know the status of him. And Briggs' sister had actually flown in like on a little plane that next morning as early as she could. So she kind of walked in, and I always tell her it was like an angel walking through the door. I was like, thank you so much for being here, And they kind of were like, it was the weekend, so doctors aren't really there, and it's kind of whoever's on call, but they're like, we're going to try to get him into surgery on Monday. They're like, we'll fix up his pelvis on Monday, and then Tuesday we'll fix his spine. And he was still pretty, he was in a coma at this point, and he wasn't very responsive, and nurses would kind of try to get him to come to. They'd be like yelling his name and asking him to wiggle his toes, and he didn't really have a response. And it wasn't until about Sunday, so he got in there Friday night, it wasn't until about Sunday that he like kind of fluttered open his eyes, and they were like, hey, your sister's here, your wife's here, and we were able to go like hold his hand, and he could respond. And so we're like, all right, he's in there, he's good. He might not be in good shape, but he's responding, which is great, because incredibly, he didn't have any head or brain damage or neck damage. That helmet really did its job on the way down. And so he was still intubated, so he couldn't communicate, but he was, opening his eyes. And I'm not sure if Brig remembers the first couple times that he did that. I don't know if
what's kind of the next experience that you have conscious?
The next thing I remember, after the ambulance, is opening my eyes and looking around, like to my left and my right, and I looked to my left, and Lauren's standing there. And like she said, I was intubated, so I had all these tubes down my throat, and my arms were strapped down, and I was pretty immobile. And I look over, and I just remember wanting so bad to apologize and tell her how sorry I was, and like tell her that I loved her, but I just couldn't talk with all that stuff down my throat. And I remember her coming over, and just the only way I could communicate was squeezing their hands. So I would just hold her hand as tight as I could. And I just remember crying a lot and just feeling horrible.
Yeah, and it was an emotional moment for sure. So when they were able to get in there and do the pelvis surgery, that was that Monday, and the doctor kind of called and said, all right, we're good here, we've got him on schedule for tomorrow to bring in the neurosurgeon. We're gonna try to fix up his spine. And then that night it took like a big turn. His levels were kind of all dropping, and they found blood clots, like massive blood clots in his heart and his lungs. And they were like, we can't do the surgery tomorrow. Like, that's way too dangerous. We gotta go in and put a filter in there, and then put him on some blood thinners. And, with luck, it takes about 6 weeks. Then we can do the surgery. And I'm kind of sitting there like, 6 weeks? He's going to lay here for 6 weeks until and they're like, yeah, that's the only way we can do it at this point. It's way too dangerous to go take him under the knife with how big these blood clots are. And so, I'm kind of communicating with family, obviously, and telling my sister-in-law who has my kids, I'm like, hey, we're going to be here a while. Like it's pretty bad, Briggs. He's doing good, but he's not in great shape. And so you're probably going to have my kids for a while. And luckily, she was more than happy to do so. And then family kind of started coming in. Brick's parents had driven through the night, and my parents had driven up to, come check in and then be with my kids. My mom stayed there for the full time that my kids were, separated from us. But so it was really, everything was, I like to say, like a big question mark while we were in the hospital. I feel like every time they gave us good news, it'd be like one step forward and then 3 steps back. He had all this fluid in his lungs for sitting for so long. So they try to prone him, is what they call it. They flip you on your stomach to try to clear your airways. And then they'd, put him on all these breathing machines. He still was intubated. And they still didn't know when they were going to do the main surgery, which was the sacrum surgery, and he couldn't sit above 30 degrees in the chair until that surgery was done. And so they'd went in, put the filter in his heart and to make sure those blood clots didn't travel anywhere. And then we were kind of just sitting on it. And I think it was the first time you were unintubated, when they finally took out all the tubes. I want to say it was after the pelvis surgery. It was Tuesday or Wednesday. They're like, hey, I think he can be unintubated. So they pulled all his tubes and he was, looking normal. He wasn't attached to all these things and he was, acting normal. And then all of a sudden he kind of just started panicking and he was, seeing things in the room and he was like, we got to get out of here. And I'm like, Brig, you're not in good shape. You can't even stand up right now. And he goes, what are you talking about? I got to get back. We'll be fine. I'm going to the dunes this season. He's talking I'm like, you don't understand. Your back's shattered. The base of your spine is completely shattered. And he was kind of in this, no, I'm good. Let's get out of here. And so the doctors kind of came in and kind of settled him back down. I don't think he remembers any of that. And they re-intubated him. They're like, he needs to be kind of more, not comatose, but we need to get him to a level where he's sedentary. He's got a lot of pain because obviously his back's in pieces. So he was on a lot of heavy medication and he just kind of was not really there for a while. Yeah. So
there's are you familiar with the different stages of grief? There's 5 of them. You ever studied this?
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you a picture. What do you remember about just how you were grieving in this process? Were all of these true at some point in the hospital as you're going through this? Or, how did it occur to you that you responded in this situation?
For sure, looking at the list here, I think denial was a big one. My brain was more of acceptance and denial coexisting together. It was I know I'm here, I know it happened, but I'm trying to do everything to not avoid, but just people were reaching out. So many people were texting me, and I have friends still Lauren, you were responding to people, you were keeping people updated. I was anything to keep my mind off of what reality was, Yeah. And so I'd accepted the fact that this is where we were, but I also was kind of in that state of denial, this isn't happening. I'm going to try to do everything to avoid facing what's happening.
Yeah.
So
Brigham, what were some of the main experiences that you remember being in the hospital?
So like I said, when I woke up and initially saw Lauren, just it was for a week or two from that accident, just tidbits of memory that I have. And like she said, when I got unintubated, the first thing I remember, they pulled out all the tubes and stuff, and for some reason I was so worried. I said, are my teeth jacked? I was just worried that I'd shattered all my teeth when I landed. And obviously it wasn't the case. They're like, no, you're fine. You're fine. And then I just remember, you know, trying to talk to Lauren and just tell her that I told her I was sorry. And she's the best, and has not let me apologize since the day it happened. Like, well, I mean, I'm extremely remorseful, and but she doesn't let me apologize to her. And I remember from that time I was unintubated to being re-intubated was probably 2 days. And I don't remember the day in between, but I remember getting re-intubated, waking up and being re-intubated, and just being so upset. Like, I did not want to be doing this again. And that lasted for another probably week of just constantly, like, having this stuff down your throat is just so uncomfortable. You can't talk, you can't communicate. And it was extremely frustrating. The only way I could communicate is we had a little whiteboard, and I could write things, or we had an alphabet and they would point out, and I could squeeze their hand and I got to letters. That was the only way I could communicate with everybody. And it was extremely frustrating. And like she said, another thing was every time the doctors came in, there was a little bit of good news, but a lot of bad news. Like, we can do the surgery, but we got to wait till this infection clears up, and that's going to take at least a couple of weeks. So you're going to be here for a couple of weeks. And I'm at this point, like, I'm ready. Like, I was ready to get out of there. I thought, I'd be there for a couple of days and head home and just recover there. And just having to face the fact that wasn't going to be the case was extremely devastating. And my kids are, 4 hours away, and I can't see them. All of my family, my parents and my sister showed up, but nobody stays the whole time. So it was me and Lauren alone a lot. A lot of people came and visited. I saw, my siblings would come, my brothers came, like, everybody came to see me. It was great. But just like the mental toll that it takes on you being there, where you're used to going outside every day, spending time doing everything you love, to just being stuck in this bed all day long with, a lot of unknowns. Because at this point, they weren't sure if I was gonna be able to walk again. They weren't sure if how long the recovery would take, if I would get feeling back in my legs, because I had a lot of nerve damage. Because all your nerve roots run through your sacrum, and the sacrum was just completely shattered. And so I lost mobility of like my left foot, so I have drop foot on the left side. And gosh, I don't know, just I'd grown up where, I didn't think like depression and stuff like that kind of stuff was real. It was, like, man up, deal with it.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's a very real experience. Like, I hit an all-time low where I was just, at rock bottom, for lack of better words, just constantly just sad. And I tried not to feel bad for myself, and I tried not to show it on the outside, but it's super hard.
Yeah.
And gosh, I don't know. A lot of it, I tell Lauren, I've told people this, but like, anything that I loved, I had to relearn, and I had a lot of lessons that had to be learned throughout the way. Even, from eating to drinking, from being intubated so long, they took it out. I had a paralyzed vocal cord, so I had to relearn how to eat and drink. And so I couldn't swallow, I couldn't chew, like, I had to chew and like, till my food was super fine, and swallow super hard. And it was a couple weeks like that where I couldn't have real food, or what else was there? I'm drawing a blank now.
What kind of thoughts are you, like, when you said you felt depressed, how was that manifesting in your thoughts? Like, are you wanting to kill yourself?
At some points, if I could have, I felt like I would have. It was
just like, if I could just snap my fingers and just be
done,
over,
I would be happy.
That would be better.
There was at one point I told Lauren, like, I wish I would have just, I wish they wouldn't have resuscitated me. I feel like I'd been a lot happier. I'm obviously, now looking back, I'm super happy for the progress that I made and where I'm at now. but it was a really low point.
Yeah. Do you remember any of these code blue experiences flatlining?
I don't remember them. Like I said, when everything went black, it was just, I don't know, it was peaceful in a way. Like I was never, scared or anything like that. It was just nice. And I mean, if I would have passed away, that was it. I would have been fine with it. Like it was nothing crazy. It wasn't painful or scary or anything like that.
Yeah. It probably gives you a pretty unique perspective on death, right? I think so many of us think about death and we think about pain and we think about misery. And, obviously there's death causes pain to a lot of people that are close to you, but it's like when you're that close to it, you realize like it's actually in probably all cases pretty peaceful when the lights go out.
Yeah.
What was the extent of these injuries and how many of these individual injuries on their own could have killed you?
So from the top, I had my right humerus was broken.
Which use human terms as well.
So the upper part of my right arm was broken. My pelvis was bookended fractured, like Lauren said. So it was split into two pieces. My sacrum was shattered, lacerated kidneys and liver. There was a spinal fluid leak, nerve damage, a lot of nerve damage, but nothing crazy, like no crazy head or brain damage.
Nothing crazy. Just outside of those, nothing crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from the outside, nothing looked horrible. There's no bones sticking out or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the internal bleeding definitely was, the biggest risk.
Yeah. And the internal bleeding, what caused that? There was a puncture of your lungs or something. So it was like a rib that went through your lungs, or what happened there?
No. So when the bike landed on top of me, there was bone fragments in there that they pulled out, but just like lots of cuts. I don't know like how bad they were. I mean, obviously they were bad enough to cause a lot of internal bleeding, but just the liver and kidneys, my lungs, luckily nothing was damaged on them. They were filled with fluid at one point and then the blood clot, but no punctures or anything like that.
Yeah. What was, how many surgeries did you have?
I think in total we're up to 12 so far. And there's a possibility for probably 2 more.
And so what is if we were looking at an x-ray now of your body, describe what that would look like.
So I have a plate for my arm where that broke. And then there's plates inside of my pelvis, front and back, holding it together. And then the sacrum was in so many pieces that they couldn't repair it. And the sacrum, like the lower part of your spine is what ties it into the pelvis. So there was no structure there. So L4, L5, there's screws bridging my spine to my pelvis. So there's quite a bit of hardware down there holding it all together at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. When you came to my house a month ago, for some reason I had this vision that you were going to, I don't know, like be in a wheelchair or crutches, like something. And like you just got out of the truck and, you're not walking normal, not to hurt your feelings, but you're not walking particularly normal. You've got a limp and, I know you've got a lot of leg damage and foot and ankle and all kinds of stuff, but you were walking, and that was shocking to me. I mean, it's a miracle. Like, do you recognize how miraculous it is that you're here and you've made this kind of progress?
Oh yeah. Luckily my friends are pretty good at taking videos, and there was a video which reminded me when we were at the bottom of that cliff. I was asking, I was like, are my feet moving? Are my feet moving? And they're like, yeah, you're moving your feet. And the relief I had, I was like, okay, I'm not paralyzed. Like I'm going to walk again. The biggest relief. And that it was from that day, October 25th, the first time I stood up was probably December 20th, in that range. And the first time I got up on my feet, like it was excruciating, but just the feeling of being able to get up and be vertical was like, it felt like I had accomplished, this enormous task.
Yeah. What was the hardest moment for you, Lauren, in the hospital?
There was a lot of those hard moments with the setbacks. Just waiting so long to finally get the okay for that initial back surgery, which it all looking back was a blessing that it happened how it did. With the blood clots that prevented that, his numbers kept dropping, and they finally ran some tests and they realized that when the bike had fallen, it had punctured one of his bowels, and the body had kind of created this, kind of kept it enclosed. Otherwise, he would have gone septic, which posed another risk, And so when they went in there and kind of dealt with that, they explained it as like kicking a beehive. Your intestines have a bunch of bacteria in them. And when you go in there and tamper with it, it's just going throughout your body. And so the surgeon that was going to do the back surgery was like, we're not touching that until infection is clear. And grateful that those blood clots were there, because if they would have gone in there not knowing about the punctured bowel, it would have been a disaster of infection and just not good. And so, but that biggest thing was just that timeline of waiting, because he had built up such a tolerance at this point that when that surgery finally came, then it was a 9-hour surgery to bridge the spine to his pelvis. And it was around December 6th. So he had sat for that long. And that night, I think it's the most pain he's ever been in his whole life. He was just screaming. Like, I just wish I had died. I'm done. Like, I can't do this anymore. And the doctors couldn't give him any more medication because he'd built up such a pain tolerance, but they'd went in there and they jostled everything and put plates in. And so now he was really hurting. And that night was probably the hardest because I couldn't do anything to help him. And the nurses couldn't do anything to help him. And even the doctors couldn't give him anything to help him. And so he's just laying there in excruciating pain for, the whole night. It was a long night. We had some long nights. He wasn't sleeping too great in the hospital, but that one probably was the hardest. Yeah. So
if you try to describe that pain, how would you describe it?
I don't know if there's words to describe. Like, literally, like, feels like getting hit by a bus, and there's nothing they can. It felt like they were giving me Tylenol at that point for, the worst. I don't know. It's like I broke every bone in my body, but it was all pushed into one area, like to the point where I was like, I vomited, and they wanted to move me and clean me up, but I was like, do not touch me. Like, I can't move. Don't touch me at all. Like, I didn't want anyone even close to me at that point. It was horrible.
Are you awake during this surgery? No. I was asleep for the entire surgery, and then I was comfortable in the room for probably like the first hour. And then after that, it just, everything came crashing down. What sort of like, I love to describe this idea that when we go through really hard things, it increases our capacity for understanding and relating to other people, right? So when you have big wins or success in life, you kind of reach higher highs. And when you have these bigger and bigger rock bottoms or traumatic experiences, you reach these lower lows, and it gives you more range to relate to people, right? So as you think about that as it pertains to your pain threshold, like, that's got to be a crazy feeling to think like you'll never go through anything ever again in your life that's that painful, right? So it's almost like you can endure anything now.
Yeah.
You've been to the craziest depths of pain maybe that you can ever feel, right?
Yeah. Well, I joke, that I know what childbirth feels like now.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe worse. But my dad and one of my brothers, they deal with chronic back pain. Like, we have hereditary back issues in my family, and just gives me a lot more compassion, like, that he can put up with that. My entire life he's put up with it.
Yeah.
Just kind of incredible.
How's your life different now with these injuries?
I try not to let it affect me, as much as it could, but I definitely don't get to do as many things as I used to, or half the things that I used to love to do. But I definitely get to spend a lot more time with my family, with my kids, get to spend more time with Lauren. Before this, I worked a lot. I was gone constantly, and now we're together pretty much all the time, which sometimes she might get a little annoyed with me, but I enjoy it. I enjoy being around. I get to learn to do, things that I probably wouldn't have done before. I started playing games a little more, which I never used to play, like video games or anything like that. What else?
I think just, like you said, just being around the kids is a big thing.
Yeah, just a lot more family time.
Yeah.
Makes you appreciate the little things.
Like what?
Like one of the really big things is when I was up in Grand Junction in the hospital, I wasn't able to get out of the bed. Like I had precautions, like you couldn't go above 30 degrees, like Lauren said. And so I couldn't be in a wheelchair to go outside and, just smell the fresh air and feel the sun. And so I begged for, it felt like weeks, just to, like, go outside. Like, we can't take you outside. Like, the gurney doesn't fit out the doors. And finally one day, one of the nurses, like, really came through, and they were, the only place that the gurney would fit was up on the helipad on the roof. And so she went through and got the permissions and took us out there. And I remember as soon as we went outside, I just felt the sun on my face, and like the wind was blowing, and just feeling like just the fresh air. I just started bawling. Like, it was the most, like, surreal thing. Just that was one of the biggest things, like, I will never take for granted again, is just being able to go outside and just be there.
Yeah. Has God given you any clarity as to, why this happened, or his plan for you?
No, I don't know. People always tell you, like, oh, like, you survived for a reason. Like, you have like a greater purpose, or there's something you're supposed to do. And it's like,
not yet. I
wish someone would just tell me, because I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever ride again?
Oh, definitely. 100%.
What are your thoughts on that, Lauren?
My point is, if it's, I'd love to see him be able to ride again. That's a personal goal and a mental goal in my eyes, of like, or achievement at that point. If he's able to get back on the bike and ride, I know he's physically able to, which is a miracle in itself, and mentally able to, which is incredible as well. When he talked about kind of being in that place, his personality is not like that at all. That was probably one of the harder things to see during this whole thing. Is just, he is a very positive person, and he still, even throughout the whole process, was a positive person. He had this mask on one time, and the lady that was administering the oxygen was like, that's the first time I've seen anyone smile at me through the oxygen mask. And so he's just a positive person. So to see him hit those lows of, like, depression and anxiety, I was like, he's never had any sort of experience like this before. So to me, for him to be able to do that would be an accomplishment. It's a little scary to think about, but I think it's a good goal to have after what he's been through, to be able to do that again. So
yeah, I'd like to kind of wrap this up by, I'm not exactly sure how I want to phrase this, but I'd love for you guys to maybe just pretend these cameras aren't on and share whatever thoughts you have with each other, just about the whole experience and what you guys went through and the path forward, and sort of leaving this behind you. And I'll let you go first, and then Brigham, I'll let you go next.
All right. Well, there's one thing I want to note just about the whole thing, that people are incredible. We were so lucky to have we have amazing friends and family, but even the strangers that showed up for us, in a place where we knew no one, and we had, people that didn't know us making sure we were okay the whole time we were there. We were there for a total of 2 months, and it was hard and it was long, and we didn't have our kids, and it was a lot of times just me and Brig. And it's really just kind of solidified our relationship. Pre-accident, yeah, we were the type of couple that we were okay doing our own thing. We loved each other, obviously. We loved being together, but he had his hobbies. I had my things that I like to do with work. He was away quite a bit, and it worked for us. But this has really made us come together in a way that I don't think naturally could have happened. We've had to rely a lot on each other through the 2 months in the hospital, and then the additional month after that he spent. And then just this time of recovery, just kind of learning the new normal of what life is, and just kind of reflecting on how lucky and blessed he was with everything that happened, that it ended the way it did. So I just think it really solidified that. And Brig's a fighter. We were set to go home right before Christmas, and then the lady that was kind of getting that all in line for us came in, and she said, "I'm sorry, the facility was working with the wrong insurance. They thought it was an auto insurance accident, so it's actually not covered. We're gonna have to find a new route. They won't cover you in a certain type of rehabilitation center. You have to be in acute rehabilitation," which is he had to tolerate 3 hours of physical therapy a day. At that point, he had stood up, I think, one time, hadn't taken any steps, couldn't get up without passing out. And they kind of came in and gave the news, and he just broke down, but he said, "I'm going to do it." And he got up and he stood up and he wanted to try, and he did. And they said, "You know what? You're good." He had the fight in him, and it just really made me appreciate, everything that he went through in that time. He really had to fight to get where he is, and he did. He made the effort and he pushed through, and he just keeps, we're still in the healing process, but every day, he gets a little better, and it's just incredible to see.
That's beautiful.
I don't know if there could have been a better partner or someone, by my side throughout all this than having Lauren, obviously. She, 90% of the time that I was in Grand Junction, was right there, slept in the hospital room with me, never left, was there anytime I needed anything. And even coming home, just, I can always count on her for anything I need. She takes care of, all the appointments, make sure that, we're where we need to be, make sure all the medication, we always have everything we need. She, for the first while when I wasn't driving, drove me everywhere, took me to every appointment. Never had, like I said, has not once let me apologize, even though there's days where it's, I feel like I've, cursed our entire family. Everything that we had was gone. And I don't know, it makes me appreciate her more and more every single day. She's incredible. I couldn't find anybody better. We've definitely grown a lot closer, and our relationship's never been stronger.
I love that. Well, thank you guys for coming on and sharing your story, and it's good to see you making progress, and I'm excited to keep checking in on you to make sure get back on that bike. That'll be hopefully I get to be there for that.
Yeah,
it'd be awesome
to
come out and ride with you. So that's a wrap. Thanks, guys.